Hey everybody, welcome to Digging Up Dillinger. We are together again. Like Travis, me, the host, Stuart Fillmore, Todd Hiles. We're just winging it tonight. Apparently, I was supposed to record. Todd was in the middle of telling us a story. We're this case is enveloping us a lot. Like everything we're doing. Like we spend time together. We talk to each other. We text each other. But Todd was telling us a story about he's watching a movie on Turner Classic Channel. Is that what it is? Or Turner Classic
Turner Classic Movies,
TCM
TMC, and
TMC?
it's from the 1940s. Long story short, but there was a murder, and the victim was had been already buried, and the defendant wanted the body exhumed for the fact that to prove that that wasn't his bullet fired from his gun, the body that was still, the bullet's still in the body. And there was this, long discussion with the lawyer and family that you don't dig up a body. Once a body's been prayed over and put in the ground, you don't pull it up. And so that, that's when I brought that up with you guys tonight. Like, what was the attitudes, back in the 30s and things like that? If this wasn't Dillinger, do we pull the body up or do we don't pull the body up?
And
What did they think about back then?
was it art, or Stuart? Do you think that it doesn't hold true?
Well, I'm not. That absolutely probably could have been a predominant thought or belief at that time, and I think maybe it probably still is today, honestly. But we actually have precedent for an exhumation in the Dillinger case already, because John Dillinger was exhumed in 1934, not long after he was buried. So and that was at the request of his own father. So this would not, if there is an exhumation, a second exhumation of Dillinger, we're just following precedent.
What's the
Stuart,
backstory on that, Stuart? What's the
Yeah,
backstory?
what?
yeah, I was gonna
Remind
say,
everybody.
Well, there's a couple of there's a couple of issues behind that that I'm not really sure ultimately what the reason. So initially there was an issue about whether that Dillinger's brain had been removed from the autopsy and that he had been buried without his brain, and that the coroner's office in Cook County, Illinois, Chicago, had kept the brain for some reason, maybe to study it, whatever. And the father, John Wilson Dillinger, was ready to go to court. He had a lawyer already. He was going to sue Cook County because he just didn't think it was right that they would keep his brain. And I'm not sure exactly how it was resolved or how. But let me backtrack just a second. So in this dispute about the brain, with the lawyer that he hired, Mr. Dillinger went through the necessary hoops at the time to get the exhumation. So he had the proper permission and authority to do it. But somehow Cook County convinced him that that they had indeed taken some very small samples of the brain for toxicological testing, which is very routine in a autopsy situation, and that indeed the brain was with the body. And I don't quite know how necessarily that was confirmed with the father, but the issue of the brain seemed to go away in the research I did. But the body is exhumed nonetheless, and for this purpose of putting this large amount of cement that I've heard or read described that's in various shapes and forms to over the coffin of Dillinger, supposedly to stop or discourage grave robbers from digging his body up so that they could put the body on display. I think that was the father's greatest nightmare, that would happen.
well, so to my knowledge, when I was growing up, I've always heard the brain was still missing. The last person we knew that possibly could have had it was Michael Jackson.
What the?
So again, that there's something else that can be possible probable cause for us, is that that this brain is missing. So
Yeah,
Oh,
something
so
else.
we could make the argument again that the brain is missing, that was never answered. So when they did dig him up, you're saying, or did they leave him in the coffin? Do we know?
Um, no, I believe that that he was that he was removed. The
The body
grave
was
was
actually taken out.
correct,
Yeah.
and that the grave was somehow prepared for this concrete vault that he was put in. That uh, that uh, that is, I don't know the exact structure or form.
Sure. No, yeah.
That's somewhat mystic actually in this whole Dillinger legend. But nonetheless, there is a slab of concrete in some form or fashion that is over that coffin that is several feet thick.
That's
Do you
it's so crazy.
do you remember, Stuart, when we were working with History Channel and dealing with Paulima? Paulima had received, I think, a phone call or a letter from a great grandson of one of the caretakers at
Yes.
Crown Hill, and they said before they put the concrete on, the FBI poured 2 vats of acid into the vault onto the body.
Yes. Yeah. That's right. Yep. So again, if that's the case, why on earth would the FBI need to do that? If this is the
Yeah.
positively identified body of Dillinger, why are we going to pour acid on it?
What's up with
Uh,
all this acid back in the day? We talked about it last
I don't know,
episode.
but
Is
you
this
know,
can we just go to the CVS and pick up some acid? I mean, like,
I'd actually forgotten about that, Travis. But you're absolutely right. That's another thing that is just a mystery in this thing.
Yeah, to my knowledge, I think he actually signed a statement, and gave it over to the production company.
Hmm.
And of course,
well, that
that's
sucks.
not in the FBI file, correct?
No, that's not in the file.
Okay.
No,
So
no. Now it is in the file. They did document this controversy about the brain, and there was a lot of reporting about that at the time. Because for our audience, just to remind, at the time, John Dillinger was a big deal. He was a big media sensation, and so this was heavily covered. This issue about the brain, because let's face it, it's somewhat gory, and you know even back then, I think people were still drawn to that kind of thing. So it was sensational. Wow, where's Dillinger's brain? And again, it's not clear from my reading how ultimately it was resolved. But Cook County said, no, we did take very small specimens as that's routine in autopsies, and I guess maybe that the old man was satisfied with that. I don't know.
Yeah, through what grandma always said, when the vault no one knows who's paid for it. I mean,
That's
Crown
another
Hill,
thing
yeah.
too. Yes. Right, Travis. Not to interrupt, but again, and you had brought up the
Yeah,
fact
but interrupt
that
anyway.
that I'll just go ahead though. That he couldn't pay for the transport to bring John back from Chicago
No, he couldn't pay for the body to be, embalmed, which was
embalmed.
that was only $50, and he had to take a collection up at the church, and
Right.
that church still stands in Mooresville.
Right. So if we, I don't know what concrete would have cost back in those days, but if it's anything comparable to now and relative to now, then that would have been probably a chunk of money to pour. I don't know how many yards of concrete down into this grave.
Exactly,
So how did he suddenly afford that?
and when this happened, what I understand from what grandma was telling me was 2 FBI agents were there when this happened.
Hmm.
So, I mean, they were still coming over and getting involved in stuff well after they said they killed him.
Yeah. So why is that? And I do know they absolutely were still doing. I guess you could call it surveillance, but they were watching the gravesite.
You know?
Because
What
there's documented reports about they people they had seen visiting the grave, and that might be a logical thing that they were looking for, thinking that one of the gang members might come to just pay their respect. They could, you know,
a
uh,
fugitive would show up.
exactly.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
mean, that's not necessarily an unreasonable thing. So that could be an explanation for that.
So in my mind, let's just assume. I mean, it's funny because we call this digging up Dillinger, and we're talking about this together about digging him up. But there's a chance that it's just acid garbage left in that would be no DNA possible in that grave. That's
Yep.
what we're saying, that someone came forward and swore under essentially a contract to say, like, this is what I was told, is
Yeah.
that they
Yes.
came and poured acid on the body.
Now, wouldn't there be acid scarring to the concrete if we were able to get in there? If there was nothing left? Would there be acid scarring onto the concrete vault?
I don't know. I don't know. And a lot of
Let's
it
go
would
to
depend
CVS and
on.
grab some acid and grab. Listen, I got
I,
some concrete too. We can just do some tests.
it would depend on the amount of acid and what type it was as to how much damage would be done, obviously.
Yeah, I think he
I
said there were like oil drums filled with acid that was poured into it. I think that's what
wow.
was said.
That's a scene right out of Breaking Bad.
I was
That's
gonna say
crazy.
that is
Like
Breaking Bad
Dexter.
101 when they got rid of one of the drug dealers at the very start
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the bathtub scene.
I tell you what, if that's true, that is wild. If that really did happen.
But
Yeah,
here's another question. Like, we're just assuming, like, oh, his body's in there in concrete, but now we're talking about it. Oh yeah, remember that there's this little story that also plays in the factor that no one knows.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
So it
Yeah, and
makes me
Crown
think.
and when I was there in the meeting with Crown Hill, they had no record of who put the concrete there, who paid for it, where it came from, nothing.
See,
So
that's just so weird. That's so questionable. Because that would have been a big deal. That would, that was
Maybe it was John.
a unique thing.
Maybe it was John
yeah,
Dillinger. He had the money. He could have he could
Yep.
have done it. And again, it
yeah.
kind of goes into, maybe John was working at the FBI to, like, cover this up because he wanted to get away.
Yeah.
And for the listeners who don't know the story, my great grandfather was approached by a traveling circus to buy John's body to take it on a road trip and display it. And he turned him down. But after that, that's when the concrete and all this stuff started happening.
Mhm. Yeah, and again, the story is that the father was, scared to death that someone was going to dig him up and and start putting his body on display. Um, not necessarily an unreasonable thought, given the sensation that Dillinger was. But, they whoever would have done that would have instantly been a fugitive, because it's even then it would have been just illegal to go dig up a body. And then now I think probably we're going to know where you are because you're you're promoting, this body. So I'm not. I understand that might have been the father's fear, but I'm not sure how reasonable that is. It makes for a great story to explain why the concrete was done, but you know I just can't help in the back of my mind wonder, is that just a good cover story for something? Because ultimately, somebody does not want anybody to know what's in that grave.
No.
What what also makes a good story is 90 years later, Travis tells us that there's people that still leave stuff at the graveside.
Yep.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, women like to visit his grave and give articles of their undergarments there.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Just
and love
articles of their
letters.
undergarments? Is that like
Yeah.
is that like a newspaper article written about someone's undergarments? That they leave?
No, no, they leave their bra and panties and love letters and chocolates and money and all kinds of little trinkets that show their love for him.
There's a long held Dillinger. Notice how I went long held Dillinger uh secret, or I guess
Legend.
theory, legend, that that we'll go into another time, because
Yeah,
we
and
got we got
I have a very funny story about this. So,
yeah, well, we're gonna spend a whole episode on I can't believe we're gonna do that, but yeah, we are gonna spend a whole
It's
episode.
it's
There's pictures.
it's that big. Yes, it's that
It's
big of
that
an
important.
yeah,
episode.
Is
it's a
that
Yes.
what
very
you said?
big deal.
It's a big deal. And then we'll figure out if it runs in the family, Travis. Look,
Whoa,
listen,
hey.
that's we'll have to you'll have to actually anyway. So here's the deal. The right, all this stuff about the grave, it actually leads perfectly into the next stage of the Fillmore report, which is one of my favorite things I've ever heard in my entire life about a mystery. And it's letters in 1959 and 1963 that were sent to the local Indianapolis newspaper, the Indianapolis Star, with somebody taking a selfie, essentially,
Yep.
or a mugshot of himself claiming that he was John Dillinger. Stuart, this is incredible. This to me, just I love how you put it at the end of the report. We've done the fingerprints, we've done like the normal, and then you got this just random thing that happened.
Yeah. Yeah, to me, so in 1959, 1963, this guy that sends this selfie in, it's a selfie for the day. There
Right.
used to be these little booths where you could go in and pay a quarter, and it would, you'd sit in front of a camera, and it would spit out, I think, 4 like portrait type photos of you, or
Yeah,
maybe
photo
almost,
booth.
yeah, photo booth, and almost like a passport type photo. So that's what these look like to me, especially in one of them. You can almost see the curtains that they used in those things. And what was interesting to me was when you first look at him, to me, they look way older than Dillinger would have necessarily been at that time. This guy to me looks like he's in his 70s. I, I think back in those days, maybe people aged a little quicker than they do now.
Yeah, there's a whole like
Yes,
TikTok, actually like a whole rabbit hole you can go down on TikTok about how in the 80s and 90s everybody looked older than they do now.
exactly. So, that could be part of it. I don't know, but and so when I first look at the pictures, I think to myself, I just don't think that's Dillinger. Um, because actually in the 59 photo, the earlier one, he looks older to me than he does in the 63 photo. But nonetheless, I I started stitching various parts of Dillinger's face against the parts of the Indy Star guy's face, and comparing them and putting them right next to each other. And lo and behold, what I started finding is man, these things match up. When you really start looking close at the details of the facial characteristics, and you look side by side, it was amazing to me how these things matched up with almost no, you have to adjust somewhat for the sizing because the photos
Sure.
themselves are a little different. But when you actually match things up, it's amazing how close things were. And the again, you see the shapes of the ears there in that one. Just the overall kind of shape of the face with this guy. Um,
Yeah, and when it's eerie. It gives me chills to look at this and see, oh my god, like this one on the bottom right.
yeah,
Uh and
yeah,
I mean both of them, both of them. I mean, it's like because the unknown male, you could tell the color mismatch on the 59 and 63. You could tell the difference between which one was taken when. So when you're stitching them, you're
yeah,
obviously using
yeah.
the
Right.
young Dillinger, but it gives me the chills, dude, when I look at it because I see you could like the one on the right looks like you're literally looking at John.
It does. It really
Yes.
does. That looks like the right side is the young guy, and left side is the older guy, but it's the same guy. You can tell it's the same guy, and it is uncanny how much they look alike. And then there's a similar one too, when you take the top half of the 59 guy with the bottom half of the 34 Dillinger, and again that looks like Dillinger to me. So.
Yeah.
So then I started comparing other things. The eyebrows are very, very similar. The shapes of the eyes are very similar. The hairline is similar. You see that kind of unique Dillinger hairline with the guy. So,
Yeah, you
you
really
know,
do. Oh my
it,
gosh.
it 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 just didn't jump out at me when you look at the pictures, independently. But man, when you really started drilling down and comparing the individual facial characteristics, I was blown away by it. I just I couldn't believe it. So who knows? Okay, let's speculate for a second that
Yeah,
Dillinger
please.
did get away, and that this is Dillinger. Did he have a hard life? Was he out just doing manual labor? Maybe drinking hard.
Well, he has the nose, right? Don't Isn't there a drinker's nose kind of that?
Kind of guy. He kind of has a drinker's nose going, and we know too that as people age, that actually the nose continues to grow somewhat because the nose is mainly cartilage, and for some reason, I don't know. Maybe some of our medical listeners can explain it, but I think noses and ears tend to keep growing as we get older. So the nose, that is one area is the nose is a little bit off with the guys, but that could be accounted for as just through aging. But again, it's uncanny really when you compare the two. And there's almost, again, there's just very, very little sizing manipulation here.
Yeah,
Isn't it
yeah,
the same
you did a great job.
individual?
Oh, I'm sorry,
Isn't this?
Travis, go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, isn't it the same individual from California?
So I think so, Travis. The quick answer to that, I haven't actually looked at that letter in a while. I think he does reference California.
Because if it
Yeah.
is, we have a letter from this individual that was sent to my grandmother. The Johnny Carson show was going to have this guy and my grandmother on Johnny Carson show, and for her to tell the world this is my brother. And my dad and my grandfather tried to convince my grandmother to do this, but also I'm like thinking now when I got older and into law enforcement, if she said it was him, he's going to jail.
Yeah, good point.
I
Yeah.
mean, the FBI is definitely going to come in and make sure he go to jail. Also, I'd like to know what happened to this guy. Did he have children, and can we do DNA testing on the children?
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a great idea, Travis. We thought of that earlier. Stuart and I were talking on the phone this week, and we actually thought that would be a good idea. Just grab a vein real quick. We'll throw some blood in the mail, and we're gonna hit 23andMe. I kind of am serious. I'm joking around, but I think that's a good idea to have that discussion about maybe you and your dad doing 23andMe and seeing if there's other cousins
Yeah.
that we don't know about yet. Anyway, pause. I'll pause. Stuart, you respond to that, and yes, he would go to jail. You're saying?
Well, my thought is that he may or may not go to jail, but who might go to jail would be J. Edgar Hoover and some
Yeah.
FBI agents that positively identified him, and now he's popping up, in California. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Wouldn't that be
so
the ultimate Uno
somebody's
reverse
going to be
card?
going to jail.
Yeah.
I
Some-
will say we have the envelope that was sent in, and if it was licked, we might be able to get DNA off of it.
Absolutely, from a stamp, because a stamp would have been licked.
Yes.
The back flap of that envelope would have been licked, and I know from a similar case or a similar situation in the Jack the Ripper case years ago. They were able to extract a DNA profile from envelopes like that where it had been licked.
So a couple of ideas. This is something that we want to continue to look into as a podcast. We have ideas on how to investigate this a little bit further. Whether we go to the Indianapolis Star and we ask to see if they have anything. Obviously, Travis has a few artifacts that we can use to possibly do some research on. But what do we know about it other than this basic story of this was sent in to the Indianapolis Star with a letter that said, "I'm John Dillinger and I got away." And what I find interesting is it was not just sent once. It would be different if it was sent once, but this dude sent it twice. That means
Yeah.
that nobody else followed up on this lead. And also the Indianapolis Star still had this. So they must have ran stories. So I want to kind of look into the research of the newspaper to see if we go in the archives in the newspaper to find, did they run this as a story? I think they did, right, Stuart?
They did, and I tell you what would
Mhm.
be, to me, even more interesting, and we might be able to do an even better comparison, is if they might still have those original photographs, because I doubt this guy, probably what he sent in was the actual photograph.
Did the
Yeah.
FBI ever go over and get the actual letters and photographs that were mailed in?
If they did, it's not documented in the file. Because I've actually been through every single page of the existing Dillinger file, and
How many pages is that, Stuart?
I don't know, it's thousands.
Yeah, it's like a couple thousand.
Which is a testament that I really don't have a life, but I have been through it, and no, there's nothing. Well, there's nothing about this this guy.
If any of our listeners recognize this photo, please reach out to us. Is this your relative?
Travis, I know you're saying that somewhat tongue in cheek, but actually, yes, that this
Yes.
could be the power of having a big audience out there. Is that someone may see that and go, "Holy cannoli, that's my grandfather, or that's my
Yeah.
great grandfather," and then we'd love to run that down.
Yeah.
So yeah, please,
Please definitely
if you
reach out
recognize the guy, reach out to us.
because
And
I might be related to you and I would like to welcome you to the family.
Because
yeah, we'll have you.
like I said, this guy's at least over age 55 that's in the picture, and so somebody that's lived 55 years has encountered people, and more than likely has a family, so somebody would know who this guy is.
That would be the greatest
Yeah.
start to this ever, because I mean, if we just want to backtrack a little bit and just put it a little bow on it, because we have one more thing. We have handwriting coming up too. Um, handwriting class, handwriting 101 class with Stuart Fillmore on the Digging Up Dillinger podcast. If we bring it back just a little bit and we say, okay, not only do we have this picture of this guy who could be the imposter, but also we've talked about the ears. Could you look at this and see the ears difference, Stuart? I mean, could you tell in these pictures
Well, there's one.
that
I
there's
mean, there's
similar?
one. There's one close up where I stitched, and unfortunately, um,
Here, I'll pull it.
let's see. The angle that they're facing the camera is very, very similar. But there's one where I did a close up where the
Is
ears,
it this
to
one?
me, yeah, seem to be pretty close. Pretty close.
I mean, I'm trying to see the ridges on the inside, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, and old age, does your inner ear
But
change? Like
but
you
but
said, the
look at
nose.
it. Look at it in context too of where the eyebrows and the very edge of the eyes are. All that, relatively speaking, looks is spot on.
Also,
In
you get
addition,
old and saggy in your face, and it
you can
pulls it
tell the
down.
guy's sagging a little bit there. You can see that, and but overall, the shape and the relative distance between things is exact.
No dimple in the
Let me ask
chin.
you, Travis. Do you think this is something that your uncle would have done? Mailed a picture in this years later?
Oh yeah, I mean, if he got away and depending on what kind of life he's living, we don't know what kind of medical conditions he was in at this time. If this was really him, I mean, if he was really maybe facing like death or something like this, he might have finally reached out to try to get a hold of the family. Um, I can see him doing it one to kind of stick it to the FBI and Hoover.
Yeah,
Like, hey, I got away all these years, you still never found me.
yeah.
Um, and this kind of his last hurrah before whatever happened. Because I mean, just looking at those photos, I don't think he's maybe in the greatest health.
Wasn't there always a story that when he was wanted, he was in a restaurant and some police officers came in, and later he called the police station?
That was
Yeah,
Matt Leach. Matt Leach,
Indiana State.
yeah,
Go ahead.
John watched him eat a pie and then called him and said, "How'd that pie taste?"
Yep.
You like
So that,
apples?
that could be definitely something in his repertoire that years
Yep.
later he would send this photograph in the
De-
letter.
Well,
Definitely,
and you know what else he did early on after he had kind of started his bank robbing career in 1933? That there was still something going on called the Chicago World's Fair, and he went with a girlfriend and asked a cop actually to take a picture with he and the girlfriend. So he loved doing those kind of little brazen things and just kind of having a little inside joke at the cop's expense.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean that does, it kind of fits with the personality. It really does.
There's a scene in the movie Public Enemies with Johnny Depp where he walks into a police station. Since we're talking about this kind of like brazen attitude, was that true, Stuart? Did
Not that I'm aware of.
That's
Now,
a Hollywood thing?
yeah, I think that was Hollywoodized, but it's I think it was done to show the what we're talking about here, where he taunts Matt Leach. He gets the cop to take the picture at the World's Fair with the girlfriend. So that was just kind of his personality.
He didn't.
Whether it was
Sorry,
just as a prank or just being a rascal, who knows? But he did it nonetheless.
Yeah, he didn't shy from the public at all. I mean, during this time, I mean, when we're talking about him being brazen and being out there in the public, he was going to Chicago Cubs games. So, I mean, he didn't hide. People didn't recognize him.
Yeah. Yeah, he looked like a regular Joe. I mean,
Yeah.
one of the TikTok videos out there is Public Enemies. It's Johnny Depp in the movie theater, and they're saying, if you see just this gang, look to your left, look to your right, everybody.
Right. Yep.
Like that's like he didn't get recognized even then in the movie. But like I'm saying the point is, it'd be easy to blend in back then. Be a little harder today.
And remember, the FBI was surveilling the farmhouse when he showed up in April 34, and they didn't do anything when they were literally right across the street.
No,
So,
I'm assuming they didn't know he was there.
He snuck
Yeah.
on the property.
He did. Well, he did. We know that he snuck on the property, and we
Yeah.
pretty much know the path that he did. It's, but they just didn't know he was there. It's just and he was there for 3 days, so it's hard to say how effective their surveillance was or how good they were at it.
Would somebody try to make this up? Would someone send their picture in and say, "I'm John Dillinger making it up"?
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
we have this is documented. People claim to be people that they aren't. It's happened in almost probably any famous case. There's somebody that's claimed to be Butch Cassidy, Billy the Kid, several others that where people want to be famous. And,
Yeah.
if I take the identity of a famous person that is dead and, it's even more glamorous or more sensational to say, hey, I'm alive. I made it.
Not only do they claim that, people claim to be John or famous people, they claim to be related to him.
Yes.
So,
And in fact, a famous case of where someone claimed to be a famous person I think we didn't really go into this, but in the discussion about the ears, that the daughter of the Russian Tsar that was killed in 1917, a lady a few years later surfaced, I think, in Paris, claiming to be Anastasia, the daughter of Nicholas the Tsar of Russia, and I think many people believed her for several years, and I think ultimately one of the ways that they found out that's not her is someone studied the ears of this woman and those of the known pictures of Anastasia, and it turns out this lady was an imposter. So not only have people faked being famous people like that, but they've done it through this identification of the ears.
You heard it
This
first,
is
Joe, on this podcast.
yeah.
what'd you say?
I said you heard it first here. The
Yeah.
imposter.
Yes. And again, the ears do not match.
No, I can emphatically say the ears do not match. I've tried to figure out a reasonable way that could have happened, maybe through the autopsy, but basically the way that the scalp is cut open during an autopsy really don't affect the ears that much. They kind of work around that. Could have been, and is really the only plausible thing I can find to explain why the ears don't match.
And when you
You
say
know,
the ears don't match, you're talking about the body in the morgue and pictures of Dillinger.
Correct. Yes.
Not the guy that sent this into the newspaper.
no.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
I
we got
I
off
can-
on that, but
I can see a little resemblance of him and my great grandfather. I mean, just a little bit of family resemblance there of how they aged. Even a little bit of Hubert, how Hubert looked when pictures I had seen of him older. So I can see some family resemblance there.
yeah, I agree. Yeah,
Or,
I
Travis,
guess
did you send me a picture of your great grandfather? I think I have
I
one
should have.
because I think that's something to hold up to the candle here. Like, hey, you kind of age this, you similar to your father, like your great grandfather and your great uncle. Would they have looked similar in their old age? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, my great grandfather, his face was a little sunken in, but again, this was during the Great Depression. Food wasn't that great, medical wasn't great. So this guy, claiming to be John, could have had a better life of living, but just some of the, I don't know, just wrinkles and just the way he looks kind of resembles John Senior.
I'm going to see if I can pull up the John Sr. picture. I'm pretty sure I got it here. Let's see if I can do it real quick. So the other thing is, do we know like the address or where this came from, Stuart, at all? Like the letter that was sent to the Indianapolis Star. Do we know anything about who sent or where it came from?
So again, I'm just not remembering at the moment the specifics about that. I think Travis, I think, is right. I do remember some connection about California, but I just don't remember specifically about it.
I'm getting the picture here. We're going to share it with everybody. If you're
Yeah,
watching on YouTube, here you go.
I just actually kind of checked it myself, and it is an interesting resemblance.
Yes.
Okay, let's see if that looks. I can't share it right at the moment, but you guys see it, right? There you go.
Yeah, and by the way, that is
Yep.
Travis's grandmother right there.
Yep, that is my grandmother Frances.
Please. So, do you guys think, based on the picture? I mean, we were looking at it, and I can't really pull it up side to side, but like, does the old guy from 1950s and 60s look like the
Tell
great
you what,
grandfather?
we'll keep our listeners. We'll tease them for next episode. I'll do a comparison and stitch those together, and we'll get a side by side with that.
Stuart, if you can definitely find a good close up picture of my grandfather.
Already got one.
Just the way how the age of him, my grandfather, and this guy, how their eyebrows droop a little bit to the age. That's what resembled. That's what kind of stood out to me as resembling him.
Okay, yeah, no, we'll definitely do that.
Hey, let me ask this question: why would this guy send the letter to the Indianapolis paper? I mean, why wouldn't he mail it to the Chicago paper, or mail it to the Chicago field office of the FBI, or mail it to Hoover them himself in Washington, D.C.? Why do you pick that particular newspaper?
Couldn't tell you. I mean,
maybe to make that hometown connection.
Yeah, right.
Because again, I mean, he did grow up in Mooresville, but he's originally from Indianapolis, and that would have been
But that was the Indy Star would have been the top newspaper to do it in. Maybe because he thought those are the only people that really care anymore. But I see your point, Todd. Like if you're going to get Hoover arrested,
if he wants
send it to the FBI,
or
right.
with the whatever the motive might be, you would think he would want to get to the biggest audience possible. So it's a good point, Todd.
But if he would have just sent it to the say he would just send it to the FBI and the FBI only, not to my grandmother, not to the news, the world would have never known about this.
No, they would have just thrown it in the trash. This is a crank. And for all we know, he might have sent it there.
Yeah, very true.
What living relatives did he have in that year besides your grandmother?
Trying to think. My grandmother, Doris, her sister, and I'm trying to think when Hubert passed. Actually, hold on. I will tell you.
But you said that they did receive a letter from a person in Chicago, or from a person from California.
It was to my grandmother Frances. Yes.
What year was that?
I'm thinking that was in the 60s or the 70s. I mean, it'd been whenever Johnny Carson was on air.
Well, that was a long time, so that doesn't.
It would have been in the earlier years of when Johnny Carson was on. I mean, my father still lived at home, so
right.
It had to been early.
Todd, this let me throw this in that we didn't mention this earlier, but this might we'll get your input on this. So this guy sent the letters not just to the Indy Star, but he also sent them to a guy named Emil Winatka Jr. And he may pronounce that Emil, but it's Emil Winatka Jr. And who that is, that's the son of the owner of the Little Bohemia Lodge, where the Dillinger gang had the famous shootout where the whole gang got away after being surrounded. FBI kills a civilian. Why would this guy have sent this to Winatka? Again, I don't know. it's an interesting question.
And Todd, Hubert, his brother, died in 1974, so he would have been alive.
Okay.
So he would have had 3 of his siblings still alive.
That he could have mailed letters to.
Yes.
But he didn't choose to do that.
He just chose to send one to my grandmother.
Your grandmother, and not Hubert, that we know of.
That we know of, yes.
And then I just, to me, if those letters existed, that would be a big indication of like importance. He always talked about how important his family was. Versus some guy in Little Bohemia.
And he sent the letter to Johnny Carson. So Johnny Carson got it, Watnika got it, Star got it, and my grandmother got one.
Which makes sense because my memory of those days when you had those photo booths, I think there were 4 pictures that came out in this little strip, and you could cut each one of them. It was either 4 or 5, but I think it was 4. So that actually makes sense. And
also the thought, though, to continue on our TikTok stuff, there were comments that people that rumors that John was seen with the sister after he was killed, right? Just random theories. Why would he send it to people who already knew he was alive? You know what I mean? Why would you send it to your sisters if they already know I'm alive? I only have 4 photos from this photo booth. I got to make my decisions pretty good.
Right.
Well, maybe he broke contact for a very long time from the family. I mean, you can think Grandma was only 12 when he supposedly died.
Allegedly
died, and the only people that visited after that was Billy Frechette, and Hubert hanging around. So would he had only notified the older members of the family, like his brother, and then broke contact?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of significance to go behind him sending them where he sent the letters, because, like you said, like from an imposter perspective, imposter of an imposter, right? Like he's pretending to be a guy who got away,
right?
I just am interested. I'd love to learn. I try to dive down into why that person sent those letters to those 4 locations.
Yes. Again, I tend, although the resemblance, when you really stitch those and compare those facial characteristics together is compelling. My thought is this is most likely, an imposter on this thing.
Yeah.
But again, just like the fingerprints, where you have the 2 fingerprints, 2 fingers of the dead guy and the known Dillinger fingerprints on at least one of the fingers, there's an absolute match. Then you have another set of fingers where I couldn't find anything that matched. Just like that, in this situation, we have the guy's signature that he sent it in, and damned if it's not very similar to Dillinger's signature. And then when you drill down into some of the specific handwriting characteristics, that Dillinger had a very unique way of writing a 5 and a 2, and if those don't absolutely match, is uncanny. So again, it's just these things. Just when is it a coincidence too far? When you say in this thing.
And and I'm thinking here, Stuart, too, when the escape from Alcatraz, the brothers, didn't a letter show up at the FBI authored by one of them, and the FBI held that for like years.
They did.
Never told anybody that they got
sure
that letter.
did.
So again, Dillinger could have wrote throughout the 40s and the 50s.
Yep.
To the FBI, and the FBI just never said it.
Well, let's face it. I mean, this would have been ruin for J. Edgar Hoover if it had been revealed that Dillinger was alive, because they had staked their professional career, or he had staked his professional career on it, by so emphatically saying, "We got him. The fingerprints proved it. It's our science, our methods, our techniques. We always get our man." And so he built that whole propaganda, public relations, brand on Dillinger. And so it would have been ruinous. So yeah, if this all, again, to speculate, but if there was an imposter, he got away, Dillinger's taunting them, or sending them letters, you can bet your bottom dollar that they're not going to reveal that.
I pulled up the letters, the signature and the handwriting.
Yeah. So okay. So if you see the on the right, you see the 25 there. I know in looking at some, Dillinger wrote a lot of letters home when he was in the penitentiary for 9 years, and in looking at those, I found that Dillinger wrote a very interesting 5, and that is that top line of a 5 that goes horizontally across. There was an exaggerated length to that top line, that top bar, whatever you call it,
Mhm.
of making a 5. And in the unknown guy, in the 63 or 60 5963 guy, the letter writer, we see that same characteristic of that long stroke on that upper line of the 5. And then the if you look at the 2s, a very similar shape of the 2s and how they're formed.
See, I'm not a
Um,
handwriting expert, and
uh,
that doesn't look very similar to me.
Okay,
The one on the left,
let me clarify
the
too. I'm
2.
not either. I'm
Yeah.
not either,
Oh,
and
you're
I'll even tell you that about a case where I had done some of my own handwriting analysis, and I thought that I had it dead on, and I interviewed somebody and really, accused her of a lot of things and being a liar and so forth. And she denied that. No, that's, it looks like, she said, oh, it looks like my handwriting, but it's not. And it turns out it wasn't her handwriting. So it's not an exact science at all. Fingerprints are way more exact than handwriting. Handwriting is very, very subjective, and all we can do is just point out some similar characteristics. But like I said, that 5 is unique, and Dillinger definitely did that. Interesting too, when we get into talking about the map, you see that same characteristic on the map that we dug up, that
Mhm.
of making this unique shape of a 5.
I still can't believe that those sentences are strung together. The map that we dug up. It's like, what? I went I'm telling people about this, obviously, it's part of my job, I travel around the state and do things, and long story short, I told somebody about this. I was like, "Hey, we're gonna look this up," and she's like, "Yeah, I don't believe you." I was like, "You don't believe me? You don't believe that I have a map?" And she goes, "No, not in the slightest. I think you're totally lying." I was like, "Okay." That's awesome. I'm
I
really
mean,
I'm
that's what Hollywood thought. I mean, it was
Oh,
fake.
that was absolutely Hollywood's reaction.
and the numbers in there I'm excited to look at too, because the map analysis is going to be big for us. Okay, real quick, I'm gonna stop sharing the Fillmore report. So there's one more thing in the Fillmore report, and we can kind of cover it in the beginning of the next episode. It's an Al Feeney letter. Unless you want to do it now, real quick. Do you want to just hit the last point? We got 7 minutes.
Okay. Why don't let's hold this one over,
Okay. Okay.
Joe, because to me this is a real mystery too. I don't have a definitive answer for what this means. But we could set it up and describe who this guy was and what this letter is, and we'll let the listeners decide.
We'll just leave it to the next
But
time.
it is, man, it's just another one of these things that when you add this all together, it it just makes you wonder, man, what's going on here? Let's solve this damn thing definitively.
We have the science and technology to do it. How
Yes.
we as amateurs
Yes.
kind of have and I'm an amateur. You guys are not amateurs. You guys are professional investigators, literally private investigators. What I'm saying is, let's just wrap up what we talked about real quick for everybody. We went over the grave a lot more than I anticipated this today, and then
Yeah.
we also went into this imposter theory, and then a little bit of the handwriting. Um, what this leaves us it's more question. It's like
Exactly.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm stumped, Stuart. I'm
That's where you
stumped.
end up. That's where you end up. About the time that I get ready to say, you know what, it is Dillinger. The FBI got their man. And then I'll say, yeah, but what about those ears? Or, what about when you
What
look
about
at
those letters?
What about those letters? What about that guy? When you look at the shapes of his eyes and the shapes of his ears and all that, when you start looking at that stuff, then I start going, man, it puts these questions in my mind that I said, if I were the case agent, I would not want these questions lingering. I would want this stuff answered.
There's meat on that bone.
There is.
Yeah. A
We
lot of
have
meat on that bone.
we have a lot of we have other avenues as well. We call it digging up Dillinger, but like we just saw tonight, there are multiple lanes that we can go down to help prove that's him or not. Some are more definitive. I even think like maybe digging him up isn't the first move or like the number one thing on our list versus maybe, running into someone who's like, oh, this was my grandmother's handkerchief who got the
Yes.
blood at the,
Yes.
you know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like
No.
that.
Yes. If we could find a known sample of Dillinger's DNA, which we don't have, so we don't have that. But if we could get a known sample of DNA of a profile of John Dillinger's DNA, we have something that we could compare it to that almost certainly would solve this without ever doing an exhumation.
This is where we will definitely need to rely on our viewers, our followers. If you have any evidence, any letter, anything that you think would help this case, reach out to us because we really want it. We really need the help. We've been working on this for years, and we're kind of just turning the wheel here. And
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
stuff out there. I know there's got to be stuff out there because when Grandma passed stuff down after she passed away, we are still uncovering new clues in all of our Dillinger artifacts that we have.
I would like to find that Johnny Carson letter.
Yeah, that'd be
I mean,
great
like,
to
who
get
owns
too.
that
Yeah.
today? To take a look at
Mhm.
that letter to see what was said to Johnny Carson.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine that people would throw that out. Like Johnny Carson's team would be like, yeah, get rid of this, like because it's kind of evidence. I don't know.
Well, they probably didn't take it seriously. They probably, like I said, when you first look at the picture of the guy, you just think this is an old man that doesn't look like Dillinger, and just just throw it in the trash. But that's just it's a thought about what could have reasonably happened.
We're gonna continue looking into all the avenues on how we do this. We love that you listen,
Yes.
comment,
Mhm.
like, share, subscribe. Please tell other people about this and keep sharing the stories. Part of this community and what brings us all together is that somebody has somebody who knew something or something happened to them related to John Dillinger, especially here in the Hoosier State. Like it's crazy how many people are
Yes.
like, "Oh, my grandmother said she saw him when she was doing this." Like, you know, the I think that connects us all. And I
Yeah.
think we got to continue that too. And also let's just solve this thing too. Like I just want
Yeah.
to get rid of it. Let's figure this out. You guys have been great. Travis, Stuart, Todd, you're going to be off a couple episodes here coming up, but we love you guys and thanks everybody for listening and
Yes.
keep digging.
Keep on digging.
Yep. Keep on digging.